All right, hello, fellow coder. Welcome to this next lesson. In this one, we will be, as promised, creating some code that will actually insert the leads into our database system. So this should hopefully be, cross your fingers, somewhat short, somewhat easy, because the CRUD operations, the standard CRUD operations, are already built into our repository that we created. So we'll just be able to leverage that existing code. So let's do that. Let's see what the existing code looks like. So we have our match here that we are able, or rather here, that we are iterating through from the API. And this is called a match DTO. And that is not the same as the actual match entity. So there needs to be some conversion here. We need to make sure that we build a new match entity, not a match DTO, because you cannot persist a DTO to a repository or to a database. You need to use an entity, right? Match is defined as an entity. This is the real database table. This is the object we need to create and hand over to Hibernate to do it, or Spring Data JPA and Hibernate to do its stuff. So some people might get confused and think, oh, I'll just use the DTO and use that and store that in the database. No, that's not how it works, because this is not annotated as an entity. So because this is not an entity, it's not a database table. So it won't know. You try to save something, an object that's not a database table, it's just gonna say, I don't know what you want from me. So we need to, step one is, since we found no match, we need to create a new match to be able to save that into the database. So we'll call it match. We'll call it I don't know, persisted match. That's kind of a bad name. I don't know. Whatever. I think that's, again, this is naming. Naming variables is very subjective. So we'll say persisted match dot, and we want to set the properties that we need to set here. Now, alternatively, I could also create a constructor to take all this in for me, which I should probably really do, right? It's neater to do that. So let's do that. Let's create a constructor inside of match. So alt insert constructor that takes not an ID, because remember the ID will be automatically generated. So if we're creating a brand new match, we don't want to set an ID into it because the database will do that for us. So we want to set this stuff, these four properties. So I'll say okay. And then I'm also going to create a constructor that is a no arg constructor, which actually, how do you do that? How do you create a no arg constructor? Select none. There we go. Boom. Whenever in Java, whenever you have a constructor, I shouldn't say in Java with Spring, you want to create a no arg constructor if you're explicitly creating a constructor that is a or rather an arg full constructor. I don't know, whatever the word is. If you have a constructor that takes arguments, you should also declare a no arg constructor for reasons that I don't want to get into. But if you don't do it, if you don't create a no arg constructor, you might hit an error down the road where it says, I don't know what you want from me, and it'll probably tell you to create a no arg constructor. So then you go and create a no arg constructor, and you're good to go. Okay. So instead of saying new match, we can now plug in the values here. How do you do this again? I want that suggested list of stuff to pop up, and I guess it doesn't know how to do that for me. So email is first. So email, let's see, this comes from match. So match.email. And yeah, it doesn't give me, it's not control space. It's not alt space. Oh, there's some shortcut key that, alt enter? No. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to bore you guys with that while I try to figure out what did I just do there? I control clicked, and then I can see sort of a hint. So I see the type, so local date time. So this is the created at. And then what else? Two more strings, but I don't know what these strings are. Full name, phone number. Okay. Oops. Full name, phone number. Match.fullname, match.phone number. Boom. There. So now that creates the match object, and now this is the entity, right? This is the representation of a row inside of a database table, as well as the representation of the database table itself. It kind of does both at the same time. Anyway, So we're essentially, now that we've instantiated it, it's essentially a new row. And this new row has the data. So what do you do with a row of data that you want to persist to a database? Well, you leverage Spring Data JPA via the match repository that we created earlier. We say match repository, because remember that has the CRUD operations, those 4 things. So we can say dot save. And you save the persisted match. Boom. So that should, if all goes well, save the records into the database. So it'll save them in here into the database, and then when it goes and polls again, it'll find the same matches again, but then it'll see that, or it'll grab the same matches from the API. It will traverse those matches. It will query the database and realize, oh, this one exists, and then go in here and do nothing. It just prints out that match, right? So that's kind of nice. Now, one thing that I already see here is it being, well, first before I get ahead of myself, let's test it. Let's see if this works. So I'll play the server, run the server. Does it work? Does it work? So no match found. I see some insert statements there, and then it should go again and then find them. There you go. Now it finds them. So let me let it go one more time. Boop. And then I'll stop. So let's go back in the log here. So no match. So he selects, no match found, inserts it into the database. Selects, no match found, inserts it into the database. Select, no match found, insert, select, no match found, insert, done. Right? Cool. So it inserted four records into the database, and we can confirm that by going to the database and saying select star from contact match, and there's four rows in there with the appropriate created dates, etc., etc. Fantastic. And then the second time around when it pulled, it said, oh, select, try to find it, and it found it. So it finds it, so it just prints it out to the console, and as you can see, we see John Doe, Jane Smith, Alex Johnson, and Emily Davis. So boom, done. And then it does it again, and then I shut down. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to have happen. Now, going back to what I was about to say, and then I stopped myself, is this is not terribly efficient. Now, for the purposes of this application that I'm building for myself, I don't need it to be efficient here because I know the volume is going to be low. However, if the volume was high, in other words, if this had like, I don't know, 10,000 records that it pulled in every time, pulling in like 10,000 records, and again, iterating through each of the 10,000 records individually and selecting, doing a find by ID, one after another, one at a time, 10,000 times, doing 10,000 select statements is horrendously inefficient, and that's what will cause a lot of issues in terms of speed in the app. It'll be very slow, Now, relatively slow, right? It can probably do 10,000 select statements in about half a second, which you may think, oh, half a second is nothing, and it is for humans. But for computers, half a second is a fairly long period of time. So there's a way to make this better. And I don't want to get into that here, but I will just talk about it. So the way to make this better is to do something called batching. So instead of doing find by each individual emails, right, you would find by and you would have all the emails together, right? So you would have the list of emails, maybe, I don't know, 1,000 emails. You'd say, find by or select star from the match contact table where the email is in, and then you pass in like 1,000 email addresses or 10,000 email addresses or 5,000, whatever the number is. That makes sense. So you find by where the email address is in that list of email addresses. And when you do it that way, then it's just more efficient, right? You can get all of them back at the same time. And then you would deal with them from there. Now, there's more code and there's more complexity needed in the code when you do it that way, right? So it's a trade-off. You can do it the easy way, which you've done, wipe your hands clean of it and move on, but it's inefficient code, or you can spend a lot more time adding more code to make it more efficient and spend that time to have it be more efficient, right? That's the trade-off. Time and efficiency, or less time and not efficient, right? So, but for the purposes of this system, of this application, because I know it's not going to be a big app. It's not going to be a heavy hitter. It's not going to have high volume. It might have like 20 rows that it comes back with at any given moment, which is, that 20 is nothing. We can do 20 select statements back to back. That's fine. It's only if you're hitting the thousands or tens of thousands, that's when you want to say, there's room for, a boost in efficiency here. So that's sort of what goes through my mind. So I think for now, this is fine. But again, whenever you have a for loop or any kind of stream, and then you're doing find by that particular thing that you're iterating through one by one, that's always a red flag for me. And I think, this could be inefficient. Let me think about this. Cool. So that's working. Fantastic. We have the records in the database. Now the next step is, well, if the lead exists, then we need to do something about it, right? And also this part, we forgot about the posting to a message to Slack. We also need to implement this. But first, I think we can do the Slack stuff last. I want to handle the situation where the lead already exists, and how should you handle it if it already exists. Cool. So I guess that'll be something that we tackle in the next one. Looking forward to seeing you. Take care. Happy learning. Bye for now.